it's Christy back with you on the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the new set by Stacy Yakola called Bunny Bouquet. So I've stamped that image out on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Extreme Black Hybrid ink. And I'm going to be coloring to match this Springing for Houndstooth 6x6 paper pad. I'm actually going to use the cover of this pad as my inspiration. So I'm going to set that off to my left side and refer back to that as I choose my colors. I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. So I'm going to start with my bunny, and I'm going to do a little brown bunny since those are what I am used to seeing in my yard come springtime, and I just so enjoy them. So I chose E50, E51, E53, and E55. So I started with that E55, laying in some shadows where the one ear is overlapping the other, down the back of the head and on the bridge of the nose, and then down the sides of the body. Then I blended that out with the E53, coloring in the little arms that you can see that are tucked behind the body as he's holding the stems of that large bouquet. And then I moved on to the E51. Now, I realized at this point that there wasn't going to be enough definition for me. I wanted him to have a little bit more contrast, so I am going to bring in the E57 and do a second layer on this guy. So I'm going to go over the shadows where I previously had the E55 and darken those up a bit with the E57. I'm being really sparing with that darkest shade. I only want to use a little bit of that to really add in those deepest shadows. And then I'll go back down in the reverse, starting next with the E55 and just making sure to really blend that out so everything is nice and smooth. Then I'll come in with the E53, and I am going to fill in most of the rest of his brown parts with the E53. I wanted there to be enough contrast also on the lighter parts of the body. So everything except for the area around the eye, I used the E53 to finish off with. And then I did fill that area in with the E51 to keep that nice and light. And then I also used the E51 combined with the E50 for the white parts of the body, and I just let that fade off into the white cardstock. I'm going to do his little feet with those two shades as well and add a little extra E50 down at the bottom of his belly. And then I moved on to adding some rosy cheeks in with RV10 and RV11, and also coloring in the inner part of the ear. Then I added the RV00 to that, and I'm going to start coloring in these small clusters of flowers down at the bottom of the bouquet. And I'm going to make the edges of the flowers darkest with a kind of white center. So I'm starting with that RV11 and just adding a very little touch of color on the tip of each petal. Then I'll come in with some RV10 and bring that forward just a little bit further. Very quick and easy, not adding in too much color because they're pretty small. And then I will also come in with just a touch of that RV00. Really just a touch of it will do because I want it to just fade into the white, but that RV00 is very pale, so it just helps that transition. Then I'll take Y11 and just dot that in to the very center of each of those flowers. So it just fades into white and then you get that nice yellow center. And I will also use Y13 and Y15 to do the centers on all of the other flowers. So everything will be very cohesive, having the same yellow center, which I think is pretty common across flowers. Then I darkened up that combo by taking away the Y11 and adding in the Y17. And I'm going to do all of these little berries and just add that Y17 down at the very bottom where the stem is attached to the berry. And then I'll come in with the Y15 next. And again, just real quick and easy. This image actually didn't take all that long to color because even though there's a lot there, all of the images are pretty small other than those two larger flowers at the top, but even they didn't take any time, hardly at all. It's just very quick and easy to color in, so I had such a good time with this image. And once again, I am referring back to that pattern paper pad over to the side as I pull all these colors together. I just thought it was so beautiful and spring-like that no matter which color I end up using as my background piece, it's going to match because I'm using all of these colors on the image. So now I'm going to move on to some purples. I pulled in V12, V15, and V17. And this time I wanted to reverse it. So instead of doing the darkest color on the outside edge, I'm going to put it on the inner part, just to show you that you can kind of mix it up and do it however you want. I am leaving just a little bit of space right around the yellow center because I didn't want it to kind of get lost in the darker color. So I left just a little ring of white around that center. And I did have a little ink blob there, but I'm going to fix that in a minute, so don't worry. But I started with the V17 first and blended out with the V15. And then I'm going to use the V12 on the very tips of the flowers. So like I said, either way I think looks really pretty. And I've seen that on lots of different flowers where sometimes the edges are darker, sometimes the inner part is darker. It's just fun to mix it up and do something a little bit different on each different type of blossom. So once I have all of the petals filled in on the edges with the V12, I'll go back and fill in that white spot right around the yellow with that V12 as well. And then I'll grab my colorless blender and just push aside that little blob of ink that I got on that one flower toward the top. Then I'm moving on to the big flowers, and I'm going to use some aqua shades. I'm using BG10 and BG11. So I'm starting with that BG11. And just like with the pink flowers, I'm going to put the darkest on the outer edges of the petals for these. Again, just trying to mix it up. So it's kind of breaking up the pattern between each of the flowers as I go up the panel. So starting with the BG11, and then I'm going to blend that out with the BG10. I am going to have to add in a third shade there, but I wasn't sure at first if the BG10 might be light enough to fade into the white, but I decided I wanted a little bit of a softer fade than what I had. So I did pull in the BG quadruple 0. So I'm just going to add a touch more of that to help it fade into the white cardstock. And then I wanted to try something different. I wanted to do like an extra color on these flowers. And I thought it would be fun to just do a really pale green. So I pulled out G20 and I'm just putting a very little touch of that on the base of each of those petals closest to the center or the stem. And I really liked how that turned out. I think that would be fun to try with other different combinations as well. Next up, I'm going to tackle the leaves. We have 3 different styles of leaves in this bouquet. So I'm going to do each kind in a different color combo. So these larger leaves that are down toward the bunny, I'm going to use YG11, YG13, and YG17. Using that YG17 at the base of each leaf and then up the center, kind of just doing like a line or maybe like a long triangle shape. And then I'm going to blend that out with the YG13. So I like this combo because it's really nice and fresh for spring, and it's very close to the darker of the 2 green combos that are on the cover of this pattern paper, also inside the pattern paper pack. So I'm going to blend that out with the YG13, and then I'll use the YG11 at the tips, so it'll be nice and light. Where the leaf is more transparent, that's where the light would show through the most. But I wanted a little extra contrast since these are the leaves that are kind of the boldest in the bunch. So I did go back to my YG17 and just add a little bit more of that right down the center, and I think that really brought them to life. Then I'm going to switch up my green combo to something a little bit more bright toned. I'm going to use YG00, YG01, and YG03 on the skinnier small leaves, and also on some of the stems that you can color in on this large image. I just think it's so beautiful. So I'm starting with the YG03 and then adding in some YG01, and then I'll use the YG00 on the tips of each of those leaves and continue coloring in some of the stems of the flowers. Then for my last combo, I wanted to go with something a little bit bolder. So I'm just using G24 and G28. I just use the two shades since these leaves are very small. So I'm using the G28 first, closest to that stem, just adding a little touch of that in. And then once I've filled in all of those little leaves, I'm going to use the G24 to just pull that color out toward the tip of each leaf. So it'll have a nice bit of contrast between those three shades of green. We've got a dark, kind of a medium, and then that really bright yellowish green, which I think is really nice for spring and just nice to have that variety. So once I am done with that, the only thing left is the stems down at the bottom that the bunny is holding. I decided to use those same shades for those stems, so just a little touch of the G28 first, and then again pulling out the rest with the G24. And then I hadn't used any orange, which was in the palette, so I decided to do the little bow that is around the bunny's neck with YR02 and YR04. And then I'll set this panel aside for now and move on to my sentiment. I'm going to use Extreme Black Hybrid ink to stamp that sentiment out, which is the same ink that I used for my images, and I'm doing the one that says sending you a huge bundle of love, which I think is appropriate for many different occasions. So it's just a great sentiment to have on a card in your stash, because you can just pull it out whenever you need it and send it to the person that would be benefiting the most from it. So then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. I created that using some snow cone cardstock, and I stamped two images down at the bottom using a new set by Rochelle Ann Miller called Best Buds, and then the sentiment came from Bunny Bouquet. So I stamped that down a couple of times to make sure that it was nice and bold, and then I'm ready to start assembling. So I trimmed down that focal panel using one of the A2 Stitch Rectangle Stacks Set 2. That is one of the most versatile die sets that I own. I use it all the time. And now I'm going to take that image and decide which of these patterns I want to use. And you can see that this card would have worked with so many, but I ended up deciding to go with the darker pink. By the way, I love that these are double-sided, so you get two different colors on each side in the same print. And I trimmed that down with my paper trimmer to cover the entire card front, because I wanted the blue core of the cardstock to be a little bit of a surprise when the recipient opens it up. So I'm going to smooth that over the top once it's on there nice and straight. And then I'm going to pop up the focal panel with some foam tape to give it a bit of lift and dimension. So I will line that up in the center of the card and press that down as well. And then my sentiment I trimmed down with one of the Essential Stitched Sentiment strips. And I'm going to add that down at the bottom. It's going to give the bunny a little bit of grounding to stand on so he doesn't look like he's just floating in the air. But I'm going to take some very thin pieces of foam tape to just stick on the edges where the flag is going to overlap the sides of the focal panel. So all that's left is to add a little bit of sparkle, and I'm going to put that on the centers of the flowers. So depending on how large that center is how much stickles it's going to get. So I didn't want to cover up any of the beautiful coloring. I worked hard on that. So just using the barest amount, but I think a little goes a long way. It's just so pretty when you pick the card up and tip it into the light. Might not be something that you even notice right away, but as soon as you start to open the card, it just kind of flashes, and I think it looks so pretty. So there you can see what I'm talking about. So I'll give you another peek at the inside as well. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to leave me a comment down below. I love chatting with you guys down there. And make sure that you subscribe to My Favorite Things for more inspiring videos all the time. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.